The people of Israel wanted a king, so God gave them Saul, a tall, impressive man who looked every bit the leader. At first, Saul led Israel to victory, but true leadership is tested in waiting, not just in battle. The Philistine army gathered, vast and intimidating. Saul's soldiers were terrified, hiding or fleeing. Saul waited at Gilgal for Samuel as instructed, but as the seventh day ended and Samuel hadn't come, panic set in. Instead of trusting God's timing, Saul took matters into his own hands. He offered the sacrifice himself, a role reserved for the prophet. Just as he finished, Samuel arrived and asked, "What have you done?" Saul blamed the circumstances, his men, even Samuel's delay. But excuses didn't matter. Saul had disobeyed God's direct command. His fear was louder than his faith. This single act of disobedience planted a seed of doubt about Saul's fitness to lead. Saul's impatience and insecurity would haunt his reign. He forgot that a king's strength comes from trusting God, not controlling outcomes. The moment Saul crossed the line, his kingdom's future changed. Saul's story warns us, leadership demands patience, trust, and obedience, especially when fear whispers otherwise. The test of a king is not in his victories, but in his willingness to wait on God. Saul failed that test. The consequences of this choice would echo through the rest of his life. Saul's heart, anxious and restless, set the stage for all that would follow. The people had their king, but he was already drifting from the heart of God. The story of Saul begins with promise, but quickly turns to warning. While Saul faltered, his son Jonathan stood out for his courage and faith. Jonathan saw the same enemy, but he also saw God's power. He believed God could save Israel, whether by many or by few. Jonathan and his armor-bearer climbed a cliff to face the Philistines alone. "Let's show ourselves," Jonathan said. "If they call us up, it's God's sign." The Philistines mocked. "Come up and we'll teach you a lesson." That was the sign Jonathan needed. He and his armor-bearer attacked, and God sent panic and an earthquake among the Philistines. The enemy turned on each other, and Israel's victory began with Jonathan's bold faith. Jonathan's trust in God changed the course of the battle. One act of faith can spark a miracle. Jonathan's story reminds us that courage and trust in God can overcome impossible odds. Where Saul hesitated, Jonathan believed, and God moved. As victory unfolded, Saul made a rash vow. "Cursed be anyone who eats before evening." His soldiers, exhausted and hungry, dared not eat. Jonathan, unaware of the oath, tasted honey and regained his strength. When told of the curse, Jonathan said, "My father has brought trouble. The army would have fought better if they'd eaten." Saul's prideful command weakened his own men. Later, starving soldiers broke God's law in their desperation. Saul discovered Jonathan had eaten, and bound by his foolish vow, declared his own son must die. The people intervened. Should Jonathan die, he who brought victory? Never. Saul's poor leadership was clear to all. His pride and rash words nearly cost Israel its hero. A leader's foolishness can endanger even the faithful. Saul's reign was marked by fear, pride, and costly mistakes. The cracks in his kingship were growing. God gave Saul another chance. Destroy the Amalekites completely. The command was clear. Leave nothing alive. Saul won the battle, but spared King Agag and the best livestock. Partial obedience is still disobedience. Samuel confronted Saul, who insisted, "I obeyed." The people kept the best animals to sacrifice. But Samuel heard the bleating sheep and saw through the excuses. God wanted obedience, not Saul's version of sacrifice. Saul blamed others, but the truth was clear. He valued his own judgment over God's word. Saul failed the test again. His heart was divided, his obedience incomplete. God's command was simple, but Saul complicated it with pride and compromise. The consequences would be severe. Saul's pattern of disobedience could no longer be ignored. The king had lost his way. Samuel delivered God's verdict. To obey is better than sacrifice. Saul's disobedience was like rebellion and idolatry. God rejected Saul as king. Saul confessed but blamed others. "I was afraid of the people." Samuel declared, "The Lord has torn the kingdom from you and given it to another." The Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul. Saul's reign was over in God's eyes, though he remained on the throne. His story is a warning. Small acts of disobedience lead to ruin. True leadership means taking responsibility and obeying God fully. Jonathan's faith stands in contrast to Saul's fear. God values obedience above all else. Saul's life reminds us to trust God's voice and follow with a whole heart.